Was this the BBC's billion-dollar mistake?
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you. And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Since airing this a year ago, the BBC has called this documentary excerpt an error of judgment because Donald Trump did not say those things in that order. But if you only watched the doc, it sure looked like he did. So let me break down what the BBC did wrong and why it's now paying a very steep price to defend its reputation.
Tim Davie has tonight resigned as Director General of the BBC, along with the CEO of BBC News, Deborah Turness.
President Trump threatening a $1 billion lawsuit against the BBC.
The origin of this now week-long nightmare spiral was this exclusive from The Telegraph, which learned of an internal BBC report that was deeply critical of how a Panorama documentary completely misled its viewers by making Trump say things he never actually said. I'll show you what I mean, along with a side-by-side transcript of Trump's full hour-long speech, just to make really clear how it's been edited.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
So these 7 words are what Trump actually said, except we have crowd shots and dramatic music layered over top. So far, pretty typical for a documentary.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you.
This is the first edit that reorders what Trump said. I don't think it alters the meaning of what he's saying. It's all part of the same thought. He is saying he'll join the crowd marching on the Capitol, but not for the reason the BBC is about to suggest.
And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
This, as you can see in the transcript, was something Trump said way later in his speech, almost a full hour later. So let's show you the original instead, what he actually told supporters what the walk to the Capitol was for.
And we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
Which, he makes clear, is to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. So it's a protest, but with no direct call to violent action, and certainly not a literal fight. What Trump was referring to when he made that fight comment, we can read in the transcript. He's talking here about election security and how Americans must stand up to corruption. That's the fight he's referring to.
And we fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
It was a big error.
The BBC couldn't even pretend that this was a slight error. To take a video of Donald Trump's speech and then to clip it, two parts of the videos that was almost 15 minutes apart is not a mistake. It's deliberately misleading the public.
And I want to point out something here because I've been working in TV news for about 20 years. It's not unusual to edit clips together. Sometimes it's because the speaker just takes too long to say the thing we're trying to show you.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down. Anyone you want, but I think right here, we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Like, yes, we get it. You're planning a walk. So maybe we would just shorten that clip to something like this.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Or maybe we think it's important to show how Trump mentioned he was planning on accompanying his supporters on the march. So we might splice this first part where he says that with this second part a few seconds later where he says they're heading to the Capitol, like so.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
So I think that feels like a fair edit to me because what we've cut out isn't editorially important. It was just repetitive. And what we're left with feels like a fair representation of what Trump actually said and meant to say. But even in this case, there are a few ways we can prioritize being transparent with our viewers. For example, by adding an obvious transition effect between the two clips that we're joining together to imply the passage of time.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
Or the kind of classic way we tend to do this in news is with the good old white flash.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol.
But the BBC, in its documentary, did neither of these things. And what's worse is if you're actually misrepresenting what someone said.
The edit, when you look at it, is putting together two sentences which are different, and it means that the meaning of those sentences becomes different.
All journalism is edited. Even this interview will be edited. But that doesn't mean that you're going to take what I say out of context. And I think what happened at the BBC is that some producer or some editor decided that they wanted to toughen up the clip.
The Trump administration believes there are two ways for the BBC to make amends. The first is to make a full and fair retraction of the Panorama documentary by a hard deadline of Friday, November 14th, 5 p.m. Eastern. The other way is to pay $1 billion US, or about $750 million British pounds. If this sounds harsh, it might be because this isn't exactly the first time Trump's team has butted heads with the BBC. This past spring, the White House attacked their coverage of the war in Gaza, accusing it of over-relying on information provided by Hamas.
The BBC, who had multiple headlines. They wrote, Israeli tank kills 26, Israeli tank kills 21, Israeli gunfire kills 31. They had to correct and take down their entire story, saying we reviewed the footage and couldn't find any evidence of anything. Oh, okay.
Now, I should point out, what really showcases how toxic this relationship has become is how the BBC completely rejected the White House's interpretation of its coverage. For starters, the BBC says, we didn't take down our story. They also clarified what they did adjust over the course of the day was fatality figures as they came in from various sources, both from the Hamas-run health ministry and groups like the International Red Cross. But to be fair, there has been legitimate criticism of the BBC's coverage more generally. Like when it was revealed earlier this year that a BBC documentary on surviving the war in Gaza failed to disclose the narrator was the son of a Hamas official. So what has emerged over time is a pattern of attacks where the Trump administration has repeatedly accused the BBC of being fake news. A charge against which the BBC is particularly vulnerable for a few reasons, all to do with the fact that it is a public broadcaster.
The BBC is tremendously influential and has been for over a century.
Everything you've just watched, everything we investigated is on our high streets, in full view of authorities.
45,000 people died who've tested positive. What do you think the mistakes were? Surely it's right to acknowledge them in order that they don't happen again.
Of course.
This tense limbo is the first achievement of Donald Trump's peace plan. But there are regular reminders of how fragile it is.
And it's also set a standard of what constitutes responsible, complete public broadcasting journalism for many organizations, both in Canada and in the United States.
So, like CBC, it's held to that very high standard of editorial fairness, obligated by its charter to provide duly accurate and impartial news, current affairs, and factual programming. It also faces a lot more scrutiny because, as a national institution, it's funded through an annual license fee of about $320 Canadian, which is about 170-ish British pounds, paid by every household in the UK with a television. Then there's the inconvenient timing of all this happening just as UK ministers are preparing to review the BBC's mission and mandate, including its funding model.
We're at a point in history where the public's trust in media is very, very low. And so these kinds of situations, high-profile allegations that media have done something wrong, are extremely damaging to an organization's credibility. Seeing turnover in leadership is also going to be extremely damaging, I think, even for morale within the organization. So I think this is a really high-stakes situation.
It's really getting quite urgent now that we have a meaningful public debate about the role of the BBC, not only in the political environment we find ourselves in, but in a situation where journalism is increasingly under pressure.
And there's no doubt there are vociferous campaigns against the BBC, either for ideological reasons or commercial reasons, and the BBC has lots of enemies out there. Now, that happens. I mean, the BBC has to live with that. What it then has to do, of course, is be as good as it possibly can be.
And so the BBC has apologized. For what? Depends on who you ask. Trump says the BBC was caught doctoring his speech. The BBC says its edit did give the impression of a direct call for violent action, and so it apologized for what it called an error of judgment. An error that, in a few ways, may now prove to be a very expensive one.